Okay, sorry. Where were we? Plaintiff Dr. Norman Finkelstein by his attorney Jonathan Wallace. Oh, we have a PDF. Plaintiff Dr. Norman Finkelstein by his attorney Jonathan Wallace presents this complaint against Nicholas Keller, Nate Gauthier, and Stephen Wallace, and allege as follows. You don't think that Jonathan Wallace and Stephen Wallace are related, do you? That like this guy's dad or brother or son is helping sue his... Okay, J-Win HD. At the beginning of February 2023, defendants Keller, Gauthier, and Wallace entered into an agreement with Dr. Norman Finkelstein to manage his social media presence. The agreement between Finkelstein and defendants entailed managing his website and creating and managing various accounts, including but not limited to X, formerly known as Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. Defendants recommended that Dr. Finkelstein transition from publishing his writings on his website to a Substack account. Finkelstein had no knowledge or understanding of how his Substack would be created or maintained. He trusted the defendants and relied on their technical experience and skills to help them navigate and engage with the social media world. Finkelstein agreed to move his writings to Substack and to publish them on Substack on the condition that Substack not be monetized. The defendants understood and reassured Finkelstein that no money would be charged to his supporters for his content, writings, and podcast episodes. Uh-oh. What does this mean? We don't know. The defendants and Dr. Finkelstein came to an agreement that the Substack account would use a donation model whereby users would be allowed free access to the Substack account and the user would be able to make voluntary donations to support the defendant's technical labor. Oh, okay, here we go. Generally, Substack is a subscription network with over 35 million active subscriptions, including more than 3 million paid subscriptions. Substack allows writers and creators to build a community of followers, publish writings. Unbeknownst to Dr. Finkelstein, the defendants created a Substack account called Norman Finkelstein's Official Substack, which enabled readers to sign up for a paid subscription. Dr. Finkelstein was unaware of this feature, and had he been informed, he would have never agreed to it. Was any of the article or any of the writing paywalled? Finkelstein's Official Substack accumulated thousands of subscriptions and hundreds of thousands of dollars in subscriptions. All funds were then processed through the Substack account, were sent to an unknown bank account that Dr. Finkelstein retains no control or access to. All the above occurred without Finkelstein's knowledge. As of this date, he still does not know anything about the secret bank account or the exact sum that was collected. How does he know? Does he know how many paid subscriptions there were then? In late December, Finkelstein became aware of the subscription scheme on his Substack account by complete happenstance. He was also made aware that the defendants appropriated all the fund subscriptions that were processed through that. He confronted the defendants and subsequently demanded the defendants relinquish all login information to his social media accounts and that his Substack account be closed. They did not abide by his request. They severed all communication to retain control over all of Finkelstein's accounts. Man, I sure do hope there's Exhibit A, and it's the agreement that these guys wrote up with each other. Oh boy. Oh man, I hope there's some kind of... Well, would you have exhibits in a complaint, in an initial complaint? You would, right? The defendants' actions were outside the scope of authority granted to them by Dr. Finkelstein in their agreement. The defendants conned Finkelstein into creating the Substack, soliciting at least $130,000 in subscriptions, perhaps hundreds of thousands of dollars in subscriptions, and appropriating the proceeds generated from that. They caused damage to his reputation, denied him access to his social media accounts, and created financial and legal liabilities for him. Plaintiff, Dr. Norman Finkelstein, is a leading scholar in the field of political science. In 2020, he was ranked the 5th most influential political scientist in the world for the years 2000 to 2020. I like how he doesn't even name the fucking whatever bullshit website that announced this. He lives in the state of New York, County of Kings. On information and belief, defendant Nicholas Keller is a resident of Maryland. Nate resides in Ohio, and Stephen Wallace resides in Maryland. I thought it said earlier that didn't I read earlier about the argument for venue? That this is the appropriate venue because is that both parties reside or are based in Kings County and the acts complained of took place here. Both parties do not reside in Kings County. That's not true. The acts took place here. I don't know how they count internet acts in civil case, in any, I don't know how that counts on the internet, but So that part is wrong, but okay. Jurisdiction is proper because plaintiff resides in Kings County, and the majority of the transactions took place here. The venue in Kings County is proper because it is the judicial district in which a substantial part of the events or omissions giving rise to plaintiff's claims occurred. Finkelstein was denied access. Sometimes in complaints, I think there are mistakes or errors. It's not like the end of the world. I think sometimes people act like if you make like a typo or like a minor complaint, or I'm sorry, a minor error in a complaint or some court filing, that you can get a whole case thrown out. And generally that's not the case, I don't think. Finkelstein was denied access to social media accounts, which subsequently created unwarranted legal and financial liabilities. Like what? Finkelstein's expressed desire to not have paid subscriptions on Substack is a testament to his values. He doesn't want to appear as if he's profiting from his moral action on behalf of the downtrodden. The monetization of social media negatively reflects and damages his reputation. Indeed, he was being mocked, even by his friends and associates, as just another profiteer from the misery of others. Can you include exhibits in a civil complaint? In New York. Oh my fucking God. Jesus, I don't even know what the fuck part I would look for here. I'm pretty sure you can, but okay, maybe it does. Lastly, defendants are withholding access to critical interviews Dr. Finkelstein conducted during their business relationship together and have purposely sabotaged current projects. No examples given for either of these, but okay. Preliminary and permanent injunction standards. Plaintiffs at the time request a preliminary and permanent injunction of defendants from releasing, deleting, and keeping from plaintiff's social media user accounts. Defendants' continuing control and operation of social media accounts goes against public interest. Plaintiffs are not released. Plaintiff has a likelihood of success on the merits based on the defendant exceeding the scope of their authority. A balancing of the equities favors the plaintiffs, and that grant of a permanent injunction. First cause of action: breach of contract. Paragraphs 1 through 25 are realleged. Dr. Finkelstein and the defendants had an understanding and agreement that they would provide technical services with no direct compensation. However, consideration was obtained through donations and exposure to Finkelstein's supporters. Oh no. The original disclaimer said nothing about paid subscriptions. It read, quote, "A statement by Norman Finkelstein. I am determined not to monetize my social media. However, I am dependent on a 3-person technical crew. Your contributions to support their vital work will be greatly appreciated. All proceeds will go to the technical crew." I mean, it seems like it just... The defendants modified the disclaimer over time without Dr. Finkelstein's permission or knowledge in order to introduce paid subscriptions and then remove the disclaimer altogether. For example, below the disclaimer cited above, they sneaked in this statement without the knowledge or permission of Dr. Finkelstein. You are currently a free subscriber to Norman Finkelstein's official Substack. For the full experience, upgrade your subscription. Follow a link, upgrade to paid. This sounds like something that Substack probably automatically adds, no? Maybe you can choose on your Substack to have this message or not. The notion of a full experience was a scam contrived by the defendants to entice users. There was no full experience. It was pure and simple, a shocking scam, highly injurious to Dr. Finkelstein's reputation. They enriched themselves and disgraced Dr. Finkelstein by implicating him in a fraudulent business practice. Below is another statement that the tech scammer is attached to Dr. Finkelstein's Substack page. Without Dr. Finkelstein's knowledge or permission, the tech scammers surreptitiously introduced the notion of a future subscription based on payments. The tech scammers were fully aware that Finkelstein categorically opposed any paid subscription system. Norman Finkelstein's official Substack is free today, but if you enjoyed this post, you can tell Norman Finkelstein's official Substack that their writing is valuable by pledging a future subscription. You won't be charged unless they enable payments. However, the defendants, without the knowledge and permission of Dr. Finkelstein, began to monetize his Substack account by the following. You're currently a free subscriber. To upgrade, or to Norman Finkelstein's official Substack, for the full experience, upgrade your subscription. The defendants breached I wonder if this is just a guy. I don't know. I wonder if on Substack, if you don't have any payment information on a Substack account, this is like the default message, and then if you like add in like bank or payment info, it changes to this. But who knows? I don't know. I don't actually know. But I'm curious about that. The defendants breached their contract with Dr. Finkelstein when they monetized the Substack account by unlawfully soliciting paid subscriptions and depositing the ill-gotten gains in a secret bank account. They falsely represented to Finkelstein that they would not monetize the Substack account, but he said they could solicit donations, though. What does my Substack say? Substack, Stephen Bonnell II. It looks like it doesn't say anything. Huh. Yeah, I don't know. You don't have paid subscriptions enabled? Oh, probably not. He suffered a financial loss due to defendant's conduct, but most importantly, he has suffered the loss of trust from his followers, as well as emotional anxieties. From onerous financial and social liabilities. What financial liabilities? What social liabilities? Conversion. They exercise dominion and control over Dr. Finkelstein's social media accounts outside the authority granted by Dr. Finkelstein. The defendants intended to assert a right, in fact, inconsistent with Dr. Finkelstein's right to control the social media accounts, the money generated by them. They act in bad faith by going against his express condition to not have his social media monetized. He still has no access to his social media or its content, despite several requests from his legal team and requests from himself. One of these requests was for media access to a specific interview with presidential candidate Dr. Cornell West. Dr. Finkelstein wanted to provide Dr. West with access to their interview together because Dr. West wanted to use the interview in his campaign for the 2024 presidential election. Dr. Finkelstein was then given the ultimatum to either drop the lawsuit or obtain the interview. Without access to his social media accounts, Dr. Finkelstein has no knowledge of the present state of his social media and its content, and there are social media posts that contradict Dr. Finkelstein's position in the academic world. No exhibits attached. No contract, no statement, no agreement, no nothing. Jesus. He's such a terrorist. He's a civil court terrorist. Holy shit. A tort terrorist, if you will. Do lawyers write this up for him? I'm sure it was prepared with assistance from his attorney. Yeah. What is it? His attorney, somebody Wallace? Jonathan Wallace? Do these lawsuits work? I mean, it depends on the underlying evidence. I mean, obviously this was received almost a month ago, so the defendants will have to send a response. I don't know what a response to a complaint looks like. What is the first response to a complaint? I don't know if that response can be a motion to dismiss, or a motion for, or if they counterclaim something, a motion for summary judgment, or if your first response has to be like just a responding to the complainers. I don't know what that first response has to look like. Jesus. Are you watching a near anime? Nope. Usually after a statement of claim is filed, the defense has to respond with a statement of defense filed 20 days after. Okay, so can the statement of defense include a motion to dismiss or a motion for summary judgment, or is a statement of defense just, I imagine in a statement of defense you either have to show that the facts aren't true. Well, I imagine there's probably a lot you could show, right? Or I don't know what you would show. You would say the other person suffered no damages, the facts aren't true, prima facie there's no case. Even if the facts are true, we would say nothing has been done here, that the person has no standing. I don't know what these. I don't know what What can a statement of defense include? In Ontario, gross.
Hello?
Hi.
Hey, you got a second?
Wait, can I use the restroom real quick and get a drink?
Of course.
Okay, love you. Hold on one sec.
Chad, I know I should be entertaining you, but I kind of don't have much to say besides what I want to say.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, hi, what's up?
Hey, so I just wanted to say this to you directly rather than, I don't know, beating around the bush on a different stream or whatever, because it is the way that I feel.
Okay.
So I know I'm not necessarily the most concise person.
Uh-huh.
When you interrupt and you say, hey, I already know what you're going to say, I want to slap you, like, in the face. And so how about, for the sake of our relationship, you can say, hey, Connor, you're being long-winded. Can you make this more concise?
My issue isn't that you're long-winded. My issue is that it feels like the story that you tell or whatever you talk about doesn't hit the meat the like central point of whatever it is I'm talking about, or whatever the other person brought up. That's the frustrating part. It's not that it's a long. I've talked to plenty of people that are long-winded. It's fine if you're long-winded, but when it feels like it doesn't go back to the main point, that's the thing that drives me crazy.
Well, then using that as an example, if we're talking about whether or not actual Justice Warrior is a liar, and then I'm bringing up a example where I felt like he could have been dishonest with me, how is that not getting to the point?
Because I feel like at that point, well, first of all, this is a little bit of minutia. I'm not even necessarily saying he's a liar. I'm saying he lied in this circumstance. Now we could extrapolate to say, okay, well, he has a pattern of lying or something. But for you to go and bring up a story, okay, sorry, my mind just jumped through a whole bunch of hoops. This is what it feels like is happening. It feels like I'm saying, I think he lied here. And you want to say, well, I don't know if he is lying, but I think that if I say that I don't know that he's lying, you're going to think that I'm biased. So I'm going to give you a story of an example of when I'm pretty sure he lied to me, just to show that I know that he's capable of lying and he has lied in the past, but I don't think he's established enough of a pattern of lying for me to actually call him a liar, but I'm not just biased because he has indeed lied to me.
Yeah, I'm not thinking that far ahead.
Okay, that's what it feels like, because I don't know why you would give an example of him lying, demonstrated that he's lying, and then use that to somehow reinforce the idea that he wasn't lying in our conversation. It feels like, what was the point of...
Because I'm trying to establish that I potentially am recognizing a pattern, and I'm trying to be forthright with the fact that I'm potentially recognizing the pattern, so it doesn't look like I'm totally sweeping. So I'm not thinking that far ahead to like... I don't even know what it would be. Like try to dodge.
Well, it sounds like
something up.
you. So, ironically, you just said what I said in way fewer words. You summarized it better. But when you said that, I'm just showing you that I'm starting to recognize a pattern. That feels like you're saying then essentially what I just said. That you're trying to show that, well, I'm not biased. He has lied to me before, and I am recognizing that. So I'm going to put that out there first before fighting back against the fact that I don't think he's 100% lying here. I don't know 100% he's lying here. But then it's like. There's like a lost argument. Then I can't, like, even if I show you 100% like he's lying, you're like, well, I haven't seen like the absolute number of lies yet to believe that. And I was like, well, what is the point of this? Yeah.
Well, okay. So now we're getting into a different topic, and I appreciate the clarification that you're saying that you don't necessarily have an issue with long-windedness. You feel like I'm being evasive, and I'll try to speak quickly and concisely to keep that going. When it comes to this topic, though. We swim in a world of people who are hyperbolic and propagandists all the time. And so lying means knowing information and then saying the opposite. That's how I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the most successful people in our space are opportunist propagandists who lie through omission.
Okay.
That's their entire career.
Okay. Okay. Wait, what is that? Or what argument are you furthering with that?
So if I was to moral frog about people who played loose with the truth or who lied through omission, I would have no one to talk to.
I understand what you're saying. Give me like a minute in my brain, okay?
Sure.
Okay. I'm doing a lot of inferencing here, okay? We all do. All humans do. Okay, I articulate it, but we all do a lot of inferencing, okay? In that when people say a few words, we extrapolate a lot and we infer a lot from the things that people say. I think it's pretty natural we do this, okay? When I'm talking to somebody and they say some things, there's a feeling that I get when they don't know something, but they want to argue it because it might play into their narrative or something, which is fair. It happens. I'm sure there are times when I do this where I don't know actually 100% what Fauci said, but I doubt Fauci would say this, right? We'll go with that, okay? Somebody tells me, hey, what about when Fauci said, I support gain-of-function research because I'm a fan of Resident Evil and I want people to turn into zombies, okay? And then let's say that I fight against it. I'm like, Fauci would never say that. Fuck you, okay? That's not true. And let's say that I take a stronger stance. I go, no, I looked at all the speeches. Fauci didn't say this, okay? No, fuck you. He did not say this. That's not true, okay? Even in saying that, if I hear somebody say, Fauci didn't say that, no, that's not true. Even if somebody says, no, I think I looked at that speech, he didn't say it. I don't remember that. That's not true, okay? It's like, okay, even at that. But let's say that somebody did a thing to where they quoted me like a part of that speech. They're like, well, in this speech, actually, Fauci said A, B, and C. and they start quoting parts of the speech, but they're not familiar with the major incriminating part that I'm talking about. At some point, it crosses over or it changes where it's like, okay, hold on. You're not just bought into this. You're not just like rambling, or you're not just like arguing to argue because you agree with this ideologically. It seems like you have done some research into this. And you're either conveniently leaving out the exculpatory part, or something like very, very, very wrong has happened here. Does that make sense?
Not only does it make sense, but that I could give you 3-minute summaries of almost every creator in the space, particularly right-wing ones. Lauren Chen, Tim Pool, Lauren Southern to some degree, even though I consider her a friend. Mm-hmm. And you could come up with a few other ones. And I would say that they've largely made a career off of playing to their audience's bias.
Sure, I agree.
Yeah, I even think this of, I like Sitch and Adam a lot. And I do think that they start from a position of trying to root their perspectives in truth. Particularly, I like Sitch. But I also think that there's an element of audience capture and or self-delusion where all the evidence is pointing in one direction, but then they come up with a reason for why they're going in the one that you almost could have predicted.
Yeah, but I think that there's meaningfully something different happening when somebody is just like audience captured versus when somebody is like telling an intentional lie.
So what was your threshold with Sean?
The fact that he brought up the Ulysses election means that he did some sort of research into that event, but apparently didn't learn a single fact about it, or learned the facts about it and knows that it's totally not comparable to what's happening today, but decided to quote selectively a part of it, which is like, okay, hold on, you know that this is not anywhere near what we're talking about today, but you still decided to run with this. Or I'm sorry, it was Hayes, not Grant. I'm sorry, Hayes.
So how do you differentiate that from people who are just biased? So for instance, like you and I probably still disagree on the Twitter files as an example, right? But I think that as I was going through that and forced to research more and more, I was realizing that nothing particularly illegal was happening. It was probably a bunch of people with predictable motivations who just went with the flow of like institutional and cultural development and never stopped to ask whether or not what they were doing could be perceived as like nefarious. And so it became like less nefarious over time, but I still felt like somebody should have stopped and said, hey, isn't this a little fucked up from this perspective? And aren't we creating all these like negative perverse incentives that can be used against us in the future?
Okay.
And so how do you differentiate someone who you think so for instance, let's say we were talking about the Twitter files in particular, and I was saying like, I feel like the government is in bed with social media, blah, 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 which is how I feel. Mm-hmm. But then you feel like there's a bunch of contradictory evidence that I'm ignoring, but I'm aware of it. How do you know that's not just me being biased and it's actually me being
So all I have is the feelings that I have after the debate, because I don't remember the fact of the matter of every single debate I've had. For big ones, I can remember some. But in our debate, I feel like the impression that I came away with was that you either hadn't read all of the underlying tweets, or you were valuing some things like, well, the FBI shouldn't be doing this a lot differently than I was, a lot differently than I was, which in my mind doesn't strike as like he's lying. I don't think I've ever had, that I can remember, I don't think I've ever had a conversation with you where I'm like, I think he's just fucking lying about this. Now, if you would have told me, actually, Destiny, you're wrong. The FBI actually does tell Twitter to take down accounts. And I know this, and you should know this, Destiny, that they told them to take down 105,000 accounts, that they had to do this. If you would have cited that, my opinion might have changed a bit, because I'm like, well, hold on. They did make that like request, but it wasn't really a demand to take anything down. It was a request saying like, oh, well, look how many accounts, they flagged, and Twitter didn't even act on this. So if you were to start citing these specifics while omitting other specifics, then I would start to really wonder. Does that make sense? There's like a difference.
But then this is where I split from like a decent chunk of experience in quote unquote the real world, right? Where I worked for the Marine Corps. I worked for law enforcement. I got a 4-year degree. I worked in the private sector, both as a teenager and a middle-aged person. And I often realized that the things that look like it's nefarious from the outside is oftentimes either human beings trying to figure it out to the best of their ability, or they're just dumb.
Sure.
Right?
Hanlon's razor, right? Don't ascribe to malice what can equally be explained by stupidity, right? Yeah.
Right. But that comes with a decade of experience, right? Whereas, or actually probably a decade and a half at this point, where I think that some people, like, not to throw Rob under the bus, but Rob as an example, or AJW as an example, they might have gotten their 2-year or 4-year degrees and then worked a single job before they became YouTubers. As a matter of fact, let me isolate it down to AJW. AJW might have, I'm not familiar with his lore, but let's say that he got his bachelor's in criminal justice. He started creating law and crime-based content. He aligns with libertarians and Republicans, and then he doesn't have any of that professional experience. And then he does have a self-reinforcing mechanism of 1, people who agree with him, 2, audience capture, 3, financial incentives. That's difficult for me to differentiate a lie between, motivated reasoning and a lie.
So here's,
and just to bring this home.
Or go ahead, finish it. Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah. So just to bring this home with the example that you said, I will defer to the FBI making these requests and Twitter as a private company saying, go fuck yourself, because as I think we both remember, Twitter actually did tell them, we're not going to do that for a healthy chunk of accounts. But I think somebody who's captured by motivated reasoning could just ignore that and say, hey, it's the federal government. You want to play nice with the federal government because of legislation. Therefore, they're going to comply disproportionately due to perverse incentives. And that's like a steel man or a nuanced position.
Sure. But so I don't know how to, I know I can explain this. When I think of somebody who's lying versus ideologically captured, an ideologically captured person and somebody that's lying, I think, act in different ways. The ideologically captured person has kind of a consistent view that doesn't require them to necessarily omit or lie about a particular thing. They just tell a certain story with some facts that are like not that great, but like it works. Whereas like the liar will start to hyper pick certain things, and it's like, hold on, you know that you're not telling the full story here. So let me ground this on an example, okay? Good mutual friend, okay, Lauren Southern, all right? You know what her favorite 2 words are?
No.
Mass migration, okay?
Yes.
If Lauren had a 4-year degree in econ and had studied like impacts of, economic impacts or whatever, of immigration across the world or some shit, and she started coming out making the same arguments she does, I would instantly assume that she's lying. Like, there's no way that you can possibly think this. It should stand at end with everything else you've learned. There's no way that you can think this. But when she argues, she sounds, no offense, she sounds like somebody who's more ideologically captured, where it's like, okay, I can tell that you've been reading things that talk about mass migration and Muslims and whatever. And even if you're saying things that are wrong, right? Okay, I can hear where these things are coming from. It sounds like it's coming from a place of like ideological capture, but it doesn't sound like it's coming from a place of like somebody who's like really well studied and read in an area and is selectively quoting just the things that they know would further their own particular agenda. Like there's a different feeling, I guess, there. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we're getting into details, I guess.
Sure.
So that this might tangent a little bit. But I think the frustration, particularly for people who have conservative leanings or libertarian leanings or whatever, is that oftentimes liberals and lesser so progressives, but I think like really well-educated liberals, they'll be like, oh, well, you just feel the way you feel because you haven't studied it enough, or you don't understand it enough, or you didn't go to the right schools, or you didn't get a 4-year degree or whatever. And in this example in particular, I think that a really well-educated person could still have a massive problem with mass migration for a variety of like cultural issues and historical issues and all that kind of crap. But I think that like a good faith version of that person who still didn't like mass migration, they would have to address the economics as well.
Sure, but like I agree,
in order to show that they're like well read on the topic.
Yeah, or not even. Or I agree in part 1 billion% with what you're saying. I agree with that 1 billion%. But the way that they would approach, like, so let's look at the AJW stuff and let's look at the Alvin Bragg stuff. Okay, AJW could have said, I think that Bragg's prosecution of Trump, his persecution of Trump, I think that it was politically motivated. And now I'm going to make some things I don't know, but like he was a lifelong liberal. He tweeted out negative statements about Donald Trump. And I think that these things shaded his perception of Trump going in. And I think that he pushed harder with these novel charges and the way that he extended the statute of limitations by saying there was a commission on. I don't think that if he was a fair DA, I don't think he would have done that, right? Now, I would disagree with this and I would fight with this. But like, okay, fine, that's an opinion you can have. But as soon as he starts either inventing quotes or selectively quoting or highly or like picking out certain events and highly misrepresenting them, now I'm like, we're at a level of detail, of granularity where you should know that what you're saying is just not true. So then the question is it just on me to point out that this isn't true and then you'll kind of like admit this and face the facts? Or are you just hoping that I'm not aware of the underlying fact of the matter? And now you auto win on this point because I can't point out that you're misrepresenting something. Like, how do you even know this? How do you even know that two prosecutors quit but not know why they quit? Or why would you say they quit for a reason? It's like when somebody says like, don't you think 6 million is kind of a lot? And then you're like, well, what do you mean? And you're like, I don't know. I'm just curious about that number. It's like, well, are you? You've been saying you were curious for 3 years. What reading have you done on it? Oh, nothing? Well, it seems like you're not really that curious then. It seems like you're just, you're being disingenuous. Yeah, that's the feeling. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, so hold on though, because this is actually really interesting from a content creation logistical perspective as well. So I do the Warhammer stuff, and the Warhammer stuff is decently successful.
Cool.
But I only spend 5 hours a week doing that.
Sure.
Because I check out new content that's come out, I research related lore, I write a preliminary script, I barely edit it, I shoot the related content, and then me and my editor, we might spend 30 minutes to 2 hours with each other, making sure that the details are fine-tuned for a product that's about to go out. So that's 5 hours. So when it comes to a lot of YouTube creators, I think that they can be really sloppy with their research because they're not incentivized to be like micro minutia detailed for somebody to grill them on a story. They're going on the internet in order to find a story that already aligns with their preconceived notion.
I understand. So that's where I think we're just missing each other on like how micro minutia this is. Like I Googled, and I learned this in about 35 seconds of just reading the first paragraph. And Sean even joked that when I was reading the quotes off to him for Alvin Bragg, he's like, oh, well, he didn't joke. He said, I think we're reading the same article. So in all of 30 seconds, I was able to Google and debunk everything that he was saying. Not just debunk it, but show that the exact opposite was true. That's highly problematic for somebody who is one, and I'm going to lean a little bit harder into him because I think he cites his criminal justice degree pretty extensively as like some kind of qualifying thing. And then he is a content creator that specializes in this type of commentary. So if you can be debunked on a major claim, because this is a really big claim, right? The president of the United States was politically prosecuted by an activist DA for no good reason. That's a really big claim. If your foundation for that claim is not only a lie, but the truth is the exact opposite of what you're saying, it's a really big deal. Like if you're not lying, the recklessness is like on the level of DUI. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, no. So what's the difference to you between like a liar and a propagandist? Because I think that this perfectly illustrates like Hassan Piker. I think Hassan Piker is I'm trying not to swear as much in my content these days.
Okay.
I think he's a massive propagandist, but I think that you could probably speak to this through personal experience. If you get him into a room, even when you prove him wrong on the facts, it doesn't matter because his overarching narrative is so politically important that if he loses on minutia, he will fight tooth and nail to post hoc justify his conclusion no matter what. But it's not because he doesn't believe it. He probably earnestly believes it. He's just...
I'm just a little bit more jaded than you. I think he knows that a lot of what he does is misinformation and BS. I'm especially getting that feeling now, especially when I look at how people navigate in adversarial spaces. People like Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, these people talk to a lot of controversial people. Look at Dave Smith, okay? After I started pushing harder on certain narratives, there's a lot of conservatives that don't want to talk to me at all now. Now, is it because I'm unhinged and crazy? Maybe that could be it. But when Dave Smith says that I'm not worth his time because he thinks I'm a bad faith actor, and then he goes and he has debates with Vosh and then Andrew Wilson, that's hard for me to, in my head, to accept that excuse, it feels more like you know that there's like a level of confrontation that you won't survive. And I get that feeling from a lot of, now, obviously, now I also have a personal incentive here.
How could this not just be he is a passionate advocate for libertarianism? He doesn't want to take a black eye in public because he knows that he's a propagandist for libertarianism. So he's going to ignore you because he knows he can, while he can spread his information unchallenged in other venues.
Because I guess it's questionable to me if you can market yourself as a big debater guy who's like so smart, but you're petrified of standing up against a certain opposition unless you have a really, really, really good reason not to. And seeing him debate Andrew Wilson.
The good reason is not wanting to take an L in public.
Yeah, but like, why would you? But then that the feeling there is that you know that if you're challenged, you're not going to be able to respond to the challenge. So do you know that you're lying, or you're inadequately support? Like, that's a lie to me. That feels like a lie to me. Then
there's an element here. So for instance, this is actually really, it's really funny that you brought this up. I was doing a series called Too Long Didn't Watch on my little political channel, and I was going back and watching some of the debates. And some of your debates, actually, specifically. One of them was you versus Sargon.
Okay.
And what was hilarious was, I remember this debate from 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. And my vibe at the time was that Sargon was evasive. He was cagey. You would catch him flat-footed. All that kind of stuff. Like he repeated himself over and over again in kind of like a statement that necessarily had to be true. Therefore, it couldn't change with any updated information. And so my perception 5 years ago was that you trounced him, right?
Okay.
But watching it slower and just paying attention to the words that were said, I'm not saying that Sargon did a good job, but I agreed with him more. Like I agree. Like if you write down the perspectives, I unabashedly believe what he said more than I believe what you said.
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying that like you aren't right in your belief system, but obviously when it comes to like rhetoric, you can trounce somebody in a debate and still be completely wrong on the facts of the matter.
Okay.
Yeah. So what
do you think that you played? Did you ever play StarCraft?
Of course.
The worst player can win sometimes, right? If you do like a cheese or whatever, like it's possible, right?
Yeah.
But you still compete to find out who the best player is, and ideally you compete to find out who the best or what the best ideas are, right? Isn't that kind of the point of, to quote Dave Rubin, who originated the concept of the marketplace of ideas, isn't the point to see ideas like score off against one another? Also, I understand too, I hear this complaint a lot, and I'm pushing back on this more, that, this guy just engages in stronger rhetoric, or he has stronger rhetoric. Rhetoric has always been, historically, my weakest point. My rhetoric is not.
I disagree, but
that's continue. Fine. But like, I don't do very good emotional appeals. I'm very bad at narrativizing. I just like to focus on like discrete things. I'm very bad at being constructive. I tend to be destructive in arguments. I just want to tear other people's points down. In some ways, this is rhetorically strong. Like if I'm just like in like a shit in your mouth contest, I want to make the other person look worse than they can make me look bad. But in terms of like overall rhetoric, like other people are usually way better at making these impassioned calls to the audience, narrativizing everything they feel, like having this constructive, positive vision of what they're advocating for. I'm usually pretty bad at those things. And whenever I hear people bring this thing out like, oh, well, in the rhetoric, you could crush somebody debate and not be right on a single point. Everybody who says this will coincidentally be a fan of Donald Trump, who is the king of rhetoric with no substance. And I was like, well, what do you actually mean when you say that then? Not you in particular, but what does one mean when they say, does he engage in rhetoric and he doesn't actually, well, all I do is truly is substance. That's my strong point. Like, okay, well, let's just sit and fucking read through this whole fucking case and find out who's right or wrong. Whereas the other person is usually the one that's trying to rhetorically outmaneuver me because they can't survive on the substance or the background. Look at my debate with Rob. Look at my debate with Andrew. It was about, well, what is the definition of this thing? What is this? Like, okay, well, we're going to play this game, I guess. Yeah.
No, this has been a pattern in my analysis. So in reviewing, not that debate in particular, but a healthy chunk of other debates, oftentimes what will be going on is you'll be debating like a specific current affair or a specific topic or a legal case or something like that. And what happens is you just read the case and then you come and you just trounce people on information they don't know. Whereas what a lot of people in this space, I have to say it's probably upwards of 90%, what they do is they just read news sources, oftentimes biased to their perspective already, and then they roll in with that as their preparation.
Sure.
So I understand what you're saying, and I think there's merit to the fact that they might be more reliant on rhetoric, but at the same time, I guess to finish that point, I don't think your rhetoric is weak at all. As a matter of fact, I think it appeals to the Twitch and YouTube political debate space the most.
I understand what you're saying, but I do a lot of reflection on how I do debates. Everything. My rhetoric is easily my weakest. The thing that I've tried to improve the most over the past really like 2 years now. What can you think of? I'm putting you on the spot. Okay, and I understand that you might have an example. By the way, I say this all the time, even though people accuse me of, oh, he just demands sources. I always say, if I'm asking for an example or a source, I understand that you can't always provide it in the middle. I don't expect you to, right? I do say that. People still accuse me otherwise of not, but whatever. Can you think of a single debate that I've won on rhetoric that I just was hopelessly lost on the substance, but I was able to like rhetorically like bring it home? We might even disagree on the underlying facts. Yeah, go on.
The closest thing that I can think of that was coming to my mind while we were talking, and by the way, like I've done like half a dozen of these, so I'm not caught up on everything.
Yeah, that's fine.
But the one that I actually found really funny, and I don't know how green you felt at the time, but Jim Medicare. So that debate from 5-6 years ago, something like that, I felt like he was doing a lot of destinyisms, like destiny arguments.
Sure.
But what was funny is he didn't have a lot of substance to back it up. So for instance, he would be asking you for sources or papers or whatever, or like information you couldn't necessarily know. And I think at the time you weren't really ready for it. So you're like, I'd have to research that. And then you would pause and like actually try to research it on the fly during the middle of the debate. So like obviously from an exterior perspective, that looks like a little weak or whatever. But then Jim would just keep on going. And then you did the Uno reverse, and then he didn't have anything for you and he just laughed.
Sure.
He just laughed it off. But that's where I would say, if you were saying that like your rhetoric has improved or you focused on your rhetoric for the past 4 or 5 years, I think that's a pretty good example.
Or I'm trying to think of like, where's an example where I've won the debate
where you just won on rhetoric.
But I was probably not. I probably didn't have the underlying facts. Yeah.
So the Sargon argument is interesting, maybe because I felt like you might have had more substantive things, but I just fundamentally disagree with you. One of the things that happened in that debate was Sargon was appealing to like nature.
Can you give me a real quick which debate was this on?
I think it was trans women or women.
Okay, I was in a hotel for this one, right?
I don't remember, to be honest. Your audio was okay.
I think it had like a dark background, and was this a 4 or 5 year ago debate?
Yes.
Okay, it might have been on trans women. Okay.
So,
this is a harder one because like the substance we both have here is literally gonna be raw philosophy, but okay.
Well, right. So just as an example for where you won more optically, but I don't think you necessarily won on substance. You kind of said like, well, you keep appealing to nature, and we do as humans, we do all this crazy shit, so you can't really keep appealing to nature. But that was pretty much like the sum total of your argument, and I would have pushed back on that almost immediately, and I would have been like, we're biological beings, and there's obviously like advantages to different modes of behavior. Also, one thing that I kept objecting to was you kept using happiness as like the evaluation of somebody's life. But then he was trying to use utility, and then you kept using like happiness as a synonym for utility, because I think that was your highest value in the conversation.
Okay.
So yeah, I didn't feel like that was your strongest debate.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I don't think it was.
The exterior perception was that you kicked ass.
Sure. I don't feel like there's any debate I've had where I've won on rhetoric, but I've lost on substance. Where like I was completely lost, but I switched over to more rhetorical posturing, and I was able to win that conversation. Because usually when I know I've lost on substance, I usually lose interest in trying to win on rhetoric because it feels slimy. So like I can think of examples where like my first Middle East debate with Ryan Dawson was I just started asking questions because there was just no shot. I was completely outclassed in my first one. Or my first debate with Nick Fuentes for immigration and stuff, I was completely outclassed. I just kind of resorted to like chatting. If I feel like I'm totally lost on the substance, my default, this is just like my nature. Like what I do is I tend to just like retreat into question asking mode because I can't argue here. But for other people that I debate, that never happens. Usually they immediately assume a stronger rhetorical posture. We can go through almost any debate I've done in the past year, whether it's Peterson, Gorka, AJW yesterday, right? Where when you're proven wrong in a fact, you kind of like tap dance your way to the next thing. Well, Braggs might not have said that, but 2 years later, 2 prosecutors quit and they said the same thing that I'm saying. Okay, well, they might not have said that, but it does go to show that, and it's like, okay, you're dancing. Yeah, hardcore. That's, yeah.
Well, that's why I kind of got pissed at AJW that the time that we had a debater conversation was because I was like, hold on, you're saying that, and by the way, in our conversation yesterday, he changed his arguments from like 2 years ago.
Sure.
So during the conversation, he was basically laughing at me and calling me a moron and saying that the hashtag not all meme was my only rhetorical, or that was my only argument. And my argument was more like, hey, no, like, you know, obviously people are materially fucked in different ways. So shouldn't we minimize the degree to which people have different circumstances and upbringing? That way we can reduce crime and then everybody has a better life. And he was like, no, that's idiotic. And so, what he said yesterday that was different from 2 years ago was he said dealing with crime is more efficient. But to me, that's just like wildly inhumane. So do we just like let human beings live in squalor in the United States of America because it's more efficient to just throw them in prison later?
Sure.
Like
or we can walk and chew gum. Like you can do both, right?
Yeah. And he said it so casually.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I push back on that. I don't like it said a lot that Destiny has strong, like this is in response to that Dave Smith thing you brought up where, oh, well, he just wants to win the debate because, you know, he's got stronger rhetoric and anybody can debate and scream down somebody and win on, you know, these fallacies. And I agree that's possible. But the thing that frustrates me is I feel like everybody that I debate tries to do that. And I'm like one of the only people that I feel like doesn't do that. Like my Andrew Wilson debate was him trying to win purely off of rhetoric. I did a lot of reading and research in preparation for that. My debate with AJW and everything 2 nights ago, they tried to win that purely off of rhetoric with no research or substance at all. And then people accuse me of doing the thing that I feel like the other people are doing, where it's like, wait, really? It feels like they're the ones that are utilizing rhetoric. I have all the facts and substance. I'm doing so much reading on it. God.
But so I've traveled a lot. I've talked to a lot of people. I've met a lot of different kinds of people or whatever. My prediction is if I hung out with Dave Smith for like, I don't know, a week.
Yep.
And we were just living his life the way that he lives his life. I don't think I would find some Machiavellian debate bro who was trying to avoid certain topics so he wouldn't get caught flat-footed. What I think I would find is a pot-smoking libertarian who found this philosophy during a formative time of his life. He made it his identity. He's leading a tribal group of libertarians online who all agree with his philosophy. And so he's going to post hoc rationalize every America bad, NATO evil, isolationist, fiscal conservative, libertarian policy that comes out of his mouth. But realistically, if I confront him while he's drinking or smoking weed, he's still going to believe in those things, even if I catch him flat-footed.
Sure, he might, but the thing is, what you're describing is that's how people think I am. But I feel like, it feels like you're almost saying the same thing that I am, that like, yeah, they all do the thing that they accuse you of doing. And if you confronted them in real life, you'd probably find out, yeah, they do the thing that they accuse you of doing.
What, that you're self-deluding and you post hoc rationalize every single one of your...
Yeah, that's what people say about my shit all the time, yeah. That's the whole point of like, oh yeah, he just debates with a lot of fallacies and blah, 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 yeah.
No, I think unfortunately, the closest thing that I've ever seen in the past half decade for a fallacy of yours was the Trump shooting debate, which was like obviously like a lot of whataboutism, quote unquote. But I also understand why you did it.
Wait, what was the Trump shooting debate?
So on Pierce Morgan.
Oh, okay.
Where you were saying like, I will denounce, violence once these two people denounce X, Y, Z, A, B, C. And they kept pressing you, and they were like, well, hold on, is it not sufficient to just say that these things are bad? And you were basically like, no, screw you. What about all these bad things that you're not even going to press your guests on because they're just going to cope about it.
Sure.
And so I understand that was like, it's an argument based off of principle. You're not doing a whataboutism because you think it's like a super strong rhetorical tool. You're doing it to make a point that you could apologize endlessly for the violence or the Trump attempted assassination, but trying to get Dave Rubin to shit talk January 6th in a public setting is going to be pulling teeth.
Yeah. But then I think you agree. You just explained all of it pretty clearly. Like none of this was like a fallacious argument or an avoidance of responsibility.
No, and I think most people who accuse you of not having like grounded arguments or logic chains, even when I disagree with you, I oftentimes understand your logic chain.
Sure. I guess, did you watch my Finkelstein debate, the 5.5 hour excruciatingly agonizing?
I haven't, but the clips that I saw weren't convincing me that you were off.
Okay.
Like they just had Finkelstein being like
calling me names. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Morcelli, you don't know anything about anything. I don't even know why you're a part of this conversation.
Yeah.
And that's all I saw. I didn't see him engaging with what you said and then illustrating why you were incorrect.
Yeah, I agree. But it bothers me that the overwhelming perception is like Destiny just talks fast, or he tries to win rhetorically, or uses debate tactics. And it's like, I literally, for the past 6 months, I publish all my notes. Like you can see the notes that I take. You can come on my stream while I'm watching or reading stuff. You can run through. We can go real deep on any argument if you want to. And anytime somebody tries to even remotely go deep, they immediately retreat. Gorka tried it with the Afghanistan thing, and supposedly in Trump's administration, he even had firsthand knowledge of that, and he retreated on that. Yeah,
I loved the Gorka conversation.
Yeah, so it's very frustrating when people accuse
you something that was insane.
What did he call me?
It had nothing to do with the conversation. You brought something up. It's in the clips. It's in the first 30 seconds of the clips, and he just said, "I can't even believe that you would do that." It was some. You must have said something about the troops or the Afghanistan withdrawal or incompetence or something like that.
Maybe, sure.
But he was so offended that he moral frogged about it instead of engaging with the point.
Yeah, he does that. Yeah, but like it's frustrating me that the other people that I debate seem like they do all those things, and then I get accused of doing all those things. And it's like, okay, and then people are like, well, that's why Dave Smith, for instance, like wouldn't debate you. It's because he knows you do all those things. Like, I don't do any of these things. Like, if you want, I will sit down and have the most boring, autistic, substantively driven discussion like in the world. But yeah, I don't.
Well, did you DM him? Did you DM him that? Did you say like,
who?
I won't raise my voice, like Dave Smith, where you're like, I won't raise my voice. We will talk about the substance. I will not engage in any fallacies. You are happy to point them out when they occur. I will be the most boring, neutral debate opponent you've ever had.
I don't think at this point I would cuck myself out that hard, but like we've exchanged DMs in the past about debating, but I don't know if he just happened to see more of my stuff or what happened, but at some point it switched to like, no, I don't think I should waste time debating Destiny. And then he debated Vosh and then
I shouldn't debate a guy with like almost 1 million subs and 250,000 views on each video.
And like, well, hold on. Yes. Also what you just said there, and I don't even bother bringing this up anymore, but that to me, maybe because it's just like we're content creator brained, that's the most obvious like flaw. Like I'm trying to imagine, if there was a guy with 500,000 subs on YouTube who had like good monthly viewership and he was saying some wild shit that I knew was fucking retarded and he openly wanted to debate people, bro, I'm jumping on that dude's stream every single day. That's free clout. That's free publicity. That's easy views. It makes me look amazing. Like, yeah, but...
Yeah, well, and that feels like cope, but I think the debate sphere, what happens to almost everybody is it is uncomfortable being on the losing side of the debate. Whether you felt like you were right or wrong doesn't really matter, and then it is uncomfortable to have hundreds or dozens of people calling you a fucking moron on the internet. I know that you're sick in the head, so negative publicity you find funny. But for most human beings, that's actually quite stressful.
I mean, I understand what you're saying and that it can be stressful and it's difficult to deal with that. But I guess my issue is it's not the individuals that have trouble dealing with it. It's like it's this weird, like the emperor has no clothes environment where they've created these entire self-reinforcing spaces where when I look at it from the outside, it just seems delusional, and it's like everybody's involved in reinforcing the delusion.
They don't care though.
But there's so many. But then my issue then to attack you. Then my issue is that it feels like people like you kind of like not support them, but like allow them, like give them a safe space to continue with the delusion. Like I can understand why you wouldn't debate Destiny. Sure. Like the rhetoric could be harsh, and like he can scream you down even if you're not like 100%. On debating on substance, he might just win because he can steamroll you and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, geez. Yeah.
Well, hold on. So yeah, that's where one of the clips that I got pissed off at, and by the way, I know you're not your audience, but one of the things that I got pissed off at, which I took as hyperbole, was neutral people are the worst. Like, I understand how you can be pissed as a debate participant that somebody is being neutral when you don't think that they should be. Totally understood. But the somebody who's trying to maintain as many relationships as possible in this space so that you can create content in the future, I take a way different tack than you, which is probably why I've also grown substantively smaller. I almost don't attack anybody unless they come at me aggressively first, and that's so I can maintain relationships.
Yeah, but
so
what I would say,
as the debate bro.
So okay. So I don't disagree with your stance. This would be the suggestion I would offer that would benefit me, obviously. So take it with a grain of salt. I don't think it would hurt you though, and I think it would improve everything. Okay, you remember? Did you watch my debate with Andrew Wilson?
Yes.
Okay.
Hold on.
Yeah, go on.
I watched which topic?
The insurrection one.
I know enough about it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. This is going to be incredibly granular. Okay. We're about to get very, very, very specific with how I'm using words here. Okay. But my debate with Andrew Wilson is that when he said he was neutral on the topic of whether or not January 6th was an insurrection, I don't believe that he was neutral on the topic, because I think that neutrality on a topic implies a level of ambivalence. It implies that you've considered at least a little bit both sides and you've come to a neutral position. And my assessment and then my assertion in that debate wasn't that he was neutral on it. It's that his position was actually undefined or null, I guess you would say, right? And that was why I used that. It was kind of a joke, and I don't know if he actually understood it or if any of the audience understood it, but I said, I asked him a question. Okay, if I were to ask you, do you think January 6th was a hula, what would your position? Would you be neutral on that? You wouldn't be neutral on it. You would say, I can't even evaluate the question. It's nonsense, right? You wouldn't say you were neutral on something. So I feel like if your position, let's say you're saying, I want to maintain bridges, I don't want to fight with everybody. If you were to say, listen, I'm a show host, or I'm a guy that does invitations behind the scenes, whether this guy was bad faith, whatever the fuck, I'm not here to make that judgment. I invite people on, they have conversations, that's for you guys to hash out. Then I'd be like, okay, fuck it, that's fine. But when somebody says well, I'm kind of neutral on it, I can see both positions, the considered neutral in my mind does a lot more harm to me in my position than a person who's like, I don't engage with that evaluation. I'm not here to evaluate that at all.
Yeah, but then this is my challenge, is I am both a combatant and someone who likes building bridges and relationships. And so I think I need to verbally put my hats on for it. Because if let's say that we're combatant, where, I'm in a debate space with AJW or Lauren Chen or whoever, and they basically cite facts that are contrary to it, then I'm going to take every opportunity that I possibly can in order to shit on them and at least make the audience understand that they're either lying or they're stupid or they're ill-informed, right? And so I'm going to maximize the amount of damage that I do in that thing because I'm a combatant, not, a host. When it comes to the hosting thing, which by the way, I'm not a big part of Hippy Dippy. Danabo, Dylan, and I are just in a group chat suggesting to each other who we think would be good, and then sending them DMs and getting yeses and nos. Right? It's not this big nefarious thing, right? But when I'm doing the hosting thing, I can't just go out into the world and be like, Lauren Chen is a lying snake in the grass who.
Sure, but you could also just not have a position on it, right? Just say I don't have a position on this. I don't make any judgments here.
Yeah, but I also feel like that's cowardly in a way.
Why is it cowardly? It's recognizing your role in your position, no? I don't for Piers Morgan. I don't know if they think my opinions are good or bad or if they're neutral. They never talk about there. Or for any major show that does, but I don't know Tim Pool's bookers, that Lisa Elizabeth chick on Twitter or whatever. I should go check. I know that she does bookings and a couple other do. I don't know their positions on any of the people. I don't think they have that position.
This is the dynamics. This is the dynamics of clout, though. And I'm not trying to dog Dylan. Dylan's done an amazing thing, created amazing content, recruited all sorts of talented people. So especially the first run of Hippy Dippy, I think Danabo and him knocked it out of the park. Second run, we're working on, right? But when we're talking about the dynamics of clout, this is a huge part of the space, subconsciously or consciously. People can get away with different levels of bad behavior based off of how relevant they are to the quote unquote national conversation.
Sure.
Vosh, if he was a smaller creator, he would have been fucking nuked from orbit over the lolicon shit.
Okay.
Like absolutely annihilated. But I guarantee you that if he ever came out of the Fortress arc and wanted to start participating in it, plenty of people would hold their tongue on it just to get him in the room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree, but even at that point, I guess I would just, holding the tongue is so,
I was about to say, how many long-term relationships have you maintained with debate opponents?
Well, have you ever been in like an abusive situation?
Of course.
Like I don't know how else to express this, but having somebody come in and both sides it is, in my mind, it is one of the most mind-destroying things that could ever happen. I would rather have an abusive person that I'm dealing with.
Example?
Like, if let's say that I'm fighting with somebody and this person has been an abusive person, I would rather have somebody come in and take that person's side and say like, yeah, fuck you, Steven, you are abusive, blah, 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 rather than what I would consider a neutral third party come in and say like, I mean, I can see both sides of this. Like, I think I understand both of your sides. That the neutral party that comes across as a more considered neutral, but is justifying what I would consider unjustifiable on the other side, like, it destroys people's minds in ways that it is just so horrible. I don't know how. It's just so horrible.
We are not talking. Yeah, this is actually one of the worst things about being a centrist or an agreeable person, is that people are temperamentally liberal, progressive, left-leaning, or they're temperamentally right-leaning. And from an agreeable centristy perspective or whatever, not only do both sides have points, but also both are necessary for society to function. And so the role of the agreeable person, however unpopular it is to try to reach some kind of like synthesis between these parties who otherwise would be at total war with each other.
Yeah, but the issue is, I just had a debate with P.F. Chung over this last night, that synthesis always, there's two huge fallacies or flaws with this assumed synthesis. One is that the correct decision is always somewhere precisely or narrowly in the middle between two considered sides or two opposite or opposing sides. And that two, every opposing side has like equal or deserves equal consideration. But like, I can imagine that like...
Can you give me an example where the solution is not somewhere in the middle, something that's like obviously morally slanting in a direction that you believe is just fundamentally correct?
Two people are having an argument and one guy is saying, there's a teacher and he's saying, listen, this student seduced me, they wanted to fuck me. I probably should have said no, but fuck it, I couldn't help it. She gave me the fuck me eyes and I ended up fucking my student. And another guy saying like, there's no way that you should have fucked this student. And the student is 11 years old.
Uh-huh.
Is this something where you would come in and say, I mean, I can see the arguments. She was wearing a lot of like crazy pink bows and like...
You had to go for the pedo.
Sure, but like, there is some. I mean, maybe she was really seductive. I mean, like, I don't know.
Well, this is. I don't want to say it's like a misunderstanding of centrism because obviously plenty of centrists do this, but I think that what an actual critical thinker would do would realize that there is a correct answer to this problem based off of a variety of considered perspectives, and that no matter what, that like the NAMBLA or the MAP or the pro-pedo or the SNECO argumentation is just going to be incorrect.
Sure,
right?
but then I would say the same would be true about like there is no neutral position on Sean's claims about Alvin Bragg's. One was a lie, and the other was what he actually said. There isn't a considered neutral there. He just lied. He's completely wrong, and you would side against him the same way you side against a teacher fucking an 11-year-old student.
So in this conversation though, in order to do that, because I view not necessarily like there's some things that we disagree with, whatever, but in order to make an evaluative claim on what's going on, I as somebody who's articulating my position in public, I have to do the research first. Right? So I have to read what Alvin Bragg said. I have to see a clip of what AJW said. I have to see what his reaction to being corrected. And then I can be like, okay, this guy, and then this guy's being disingenuous.
Yeah, but you're making arguments for you having the unconsidered position. Just say like, oh, like I don't have a stance on this at all, rather than the considered neutral, where I'm neutral on this. I don't know, could be, couldn't be.
Yeah, so I would say that if this is getting back to the BPF, the Andrew Wilson debate or whatever, I agree that his position was unconsidered, not considered. And then I also agree that even if I articulated it poorly, yesterday I was trying to say, in reference to whether or not AJW is a liar, I have an unconsidered position in reference to that.
Okay. I didn't feel that way. I feel like if I go back and I watch it, I'm not sure 100% if that would be the impression I would get. But I don't think there's anything wrong with an unconsidered neutral. So going back to the abuse example, if somebody's like, hey, do you think she was abusive to me? And the guy's like, I don't know any of the details, bro. I couldn't tell you. I'm sorry. As opposed to like, I can kind of see both sides of it. Even though these are both in common parlance, people might say both people have a neutral position. The considered neutral is a lot different than the unconsidered neutral. The guy just doesn't have an opinion.
Okay, so hold on. This is a frustration of mine, though. Specifically, I can use an example from the conversation yesterday.
Okay.
So the debate Friday, I guess. So Pisco has a talent for being self-righteously offended by other people's positions.
Yeah, he can.
He loves to be offended by somebody's position and act like they're a total moron.
Okay.
And what I think was interesting about AJW saying like, hey, I actually need to think about the Civil War example. The reason why I kind of reflexively get pissed off at Pisco is because there's an interesting conversation there, right? Like, what's the democracy of the states versus the democracy of the federal body of the United States? What did the Articles of Confederation versus the Bill of Rights look like? What was all the legislation through the early 19th century look like where states thought that they could secede?
Sure,
and then
but
you could actually come to an argument that like the secessionist states were protecting their internal democracy.
I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying here, but contextually, the answer is wild because it shows a horrendously bad faith approach to what the debate actually was. So, for instance, let's say this is one of the reasons why I hate the. Do you know the Fabian Scott guy?
Yes, of course.
This is one reason I don't like him on any panel I've ever been on. Okay, let's say that you get into a debate with somebody, and the debate is, did O.J. Simpson murder? Was it Nicole? I don't even fucking know. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Did O.J. Simpson murder Nicole? Okay. And let's say that you start to have this debate and, the other guy is like, well, they didn't prove it. The glove didn't fit. There were all these other facts that don't line up. And let's say at some point you're like, hold on. Okay. Jesus, hold the fuck on. Wait a second. Do you think that, give me one famous murder in history. Who murdered somebody?
I mean, O.J. Simpson, obviously. No. John Lennon?
Okay. Do you think that John Lennon was murdered? Well, let's not do that one. Do you think John Lennon was murdered? Okay, let's say you asked me, do you think John Lennon was murdered? Do you think I don't know, was that guy ever convicted? Did they find him?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Do you think John Lennon was murdered? Then let's say that their answer was, well, that's a really good question. John Lennon, when he was killed, is in the United States of America. I think that murder is a legal judgment, and I'm a libertarian, and I don't know if I'm comfortable with the state being able to make that determination. So it's a really, as soon as they answer that question, the issue isn't that like they're taking a libertarian approach to the concept of what a murder. That's not the issue. The issue is like, hold on, why the fuck are we debating whether or not O.J. Simpson was murdered or not if you don't even believe in the legal concept of murder, right? I personally, I would never have a debate with somebody about if democracy was on the ballot if they can't quickly and concisely think that the Civil War was a threat to American democracy. Because what that tells me is I have to prove that just voting for Donald Trump is a greater existential threat than an actual having occurred Civil War. I could never meet that burden. I just wouldn't even have the debate.
This is where I feel partially responsible, though. So I'm not saying that Sean is acting necessarily in good faith or whatever for the thing, but I also think that Sean probably does have some level of autism. And so if I look at Lauren, I said, hey, do you want to debate whether or not Trump is going to, and I would have to look at the exact text, but I basically say like, is democracy at threat in the upcoming election? And Lauren's like, maybe I would do it. I don't know. I would want Sean there. He's a good debater. What's the exact prompt? Right. And so I sent her the exact prompt and then she's like, okay, I'm good to go. Set it up. As long as Sean's willing to do it, set it up. With Sean, though, what happens is I sent him the more hyperbolic version, right? I said, is Trump going to end democracy if he's elected?
Sure.
And so that's the more hyperbolic version that, of course, is supposed to be tittillating so I can recruit people for the panel. And then he didn't ask and I didn't say.
Sure, so but even I don't think I would be shocked, and maybe she would, because we disagree on a lot of things. I would be shocked if I asked Lauren Southern, do you think the Civil War was a threat to you? I don't think she'd be like, well, that's a really good question. Was it a threat? I'm not actually sure. Or if I were to ask Lauren Southern, if Trump ended democracy for 4 years and then we managed to have a revolution and bring it back, would you say that was a threat to democracy? I don't think Lauren would go, no, I guess not, because it came back in 4 years. Those are exceptionally stupid answers. that
Sure, but I
Sean
also
gave.
feel ill-equipped. I feel ill-equipped to condemn because I caught the second hour of the debate and not the first.
Sure,
right?
but you don't have to condemn. Just
So
don't. But don't
I
even don't take a
literally-
considered neutral on it. Just be like, oh, I don't have a position, whatever. That's it. Rather than saying like, well,
Sure.
you know,
Yeah, but
yes, it was a good question, and maybe
But I
you
also
could
want
consider.
to. But I also want to extend as much good faith as possible because I'm the one who technically fucked it up. Right?
I don't
You
agree
can
with that. You
say-
didn't fuck it up, but
Well, okay, and I was about to say you can disagree with that, but I bear some level of culpability because here's the thing: even if Sean was moving to a different frame, right? Like after the initial, I don't know, 30 minutes of the debate where we're squabbling over definitions or whatever, he might have seen Trump is going to end democracy in 2024, and then basically been like, oh, this is an easy dub, easy win. Barely have to research it. I can show up and I can trounce anybody on this shit. And so that's where, for me, that's if he thought that at any point, that's partially my fuck up.
well, but like
Now,
no,
the-
okay,
now
not
the
to not to
arguments
toot my own
past
home.
that-
No, hold on, not to toot my own horn, okay. But if I've earned anything in fucking 8 years, I would say that I command some level of respect, okay, as a debater in the space. I would hope. Would a reasonable person really think that Stephen is coming to this debate to argue that Donald Trump is going to be elected, end democracy permanently and forever, and that he could justify that in a debate? That's a really ambitious prompt, even from me. Like
the permanently and forever thing is where that's where I'm like, that's not me, that's you, right? Because you can, for instance, with the Civil War thing, which I think is obvious, but apparently it's not obvious, is the Civil War didn't end democracy in the United States if you consider the federal government, the continuity of the federal government of the United States, the level to which democracy would be ended, right? But if you consider democracy for the slaves or the Confederacy to become more totalitarian under their own power, then obviously it was an existential threat to the United States that would have ended democracy for tons of people.
sure, but like
So
even
to
at
say
the end
that
yesterday,
you can't.
even yesterday in the conversation, we asked, Sean doesn't even think the United States is a democracy. So it's like, what does he even have a position on anything? Like what?
Autism.
It's, but
Yeah, then
I
I
don't
think
think,
it's autism.
I think that it's autism if it manifests in all areas, but when it's selective autism, it's just bad faith, right? Like if somebody were to say, like, how can you be that autistic about, is it a threat to democracy? And then say, well, the DNC absolutely committed a coup when they replaced Biden with Kamala. You can't have both those positions. That's not autism, right? Yeah.
Yeah, this brings me back to a point that I want to make, and then honestly, I probably have to go do something else because I'm working on some side projects.
That's good.
But the thing about it is, though, the more that I participated in this space, I thought that I was going to come in and I was going to have such novel and interesting and intelligent and well articulated and concise points that I was just going to build a cult of personality, create an ideology, and become a multimillionaire. Right? That was the dream when I first started.
Okay.
What I've realized, though, by looking at a lot of creators, is that they didn't come in with some novel ideology. They oftentimes find an ideology that they already largely agree with, and then they just say what that tribe wants to hear. And then they ride the crest of energy of that political tribe into relevance. But the second that they try to break out of their little box of political tribalism, oftentimes they take massive shit from their audience, they lose money, and they lose relevance. So my point is that these people, I borderline don't view them as personalities anymore, capable of like autonomy.
Sure.
I
Just as a
almost
quick
view them
thing,
as like,
what you're saying also applies to the entire media sphere, not just alternative media. You might already know that, but yeah, but go ahead.
but basically, I don't view them as people capable of individual conscience anymore. I almost view them as like tribal leaders.
Sure, but then also, if you just said that, I'd be fine with that. Like, if you came in yesterday while people were talking to Sean, you're like, listen, I don't think Sean is capable of generating independent thought because he's so heavily audience captured. I'd be like, oh, okay, fine. That's fine. I buy that. Okay, sure. That's my position. Yeah.
Sure. I think, but I still stand by what I said yesterday, which I'm kind of drawing a blank on right now, which is I think that there's considerations when you're somebody who's trying to recruit people for future debates and shows. You'll look past that shit. And then also when it comes to like a liar, like you have to evaluate a pattern of behavior, because there are self-deluded tribal leaders. So for instance, let's say that, I'm not saying Nick Fuentes is gay, but let's say that he had homosexual impulses.
Okay.
Is there a world in which he is so captured by Christian nationalism that he cannot bring himself to acknowledge his homosexual impulses because he's literally self-delusional?
Yeah, for sure. People do that. There's examples in the real world of this, of like gay conservatives that don't want to come out because they're worried about how they'd be received and everything, right?
That dad in American Beauty. Sorry, I just wanted to make one quick appeal on behalf of all the autistic people watching, which is probably most of them.
Fuck.
Don't call it autism, okay?
Yeah.
It's not autism. What they do is, what Republicans and conservatives do is, and I've noticed this from like 3 conversations with them, is they're not being autistic, they are being a fucking idiot's stereotype of an autistic person.
Yeah.
Okay, autistic people don't struggle with fucking subtext. Okay, they pretend. People like this pretend to when it suits them, and then suddenly they are very, very aware of subtext as soon as it's happening in their direction.
Yeah.
Case in point,
Kelly
it's
Jean.
It's your fault that Trump
sorry.
got assassinated. Had someone tried to kill him because you keep comparing him to Hitler. Well, but also everything we said about the election was not incitement to violence or to an insurrection.
Yeah, this is what I was pointing out before with like the selective.
Do you have a better word?
Well, it's not autism; it's bad faith or maliciousness, right?
Obtuse. Yeah.
Selective autism?
No, it's not. But
it's not even selective. It's like it's intentionally obtuse. Yeah, it's acting.
Well,
obtuse.
I used obtuse yesterday, and Destiny didn't feel like that carried enough intention.
Well, you just said it didn't carry enough intention. Lonerbox used the phrase intentionally obtuse, not just obtuse. Obtuse is like somebody that misses the point. You're being obtuse. Well, no. Obtuse carries with it a slight connotation of intentionality, but it's still not harsh enough for what's happening. A person's not just being obtuse by missing the point. It is intentional. It is bad faith. Like, Sean knows that what he's saying is incorrect, and he's trying to tilt it in the best possible way that he can to represent an argument that he knows is unjustifiable. That's bad faith. That's nothing about that is autistic. Nothing about that is...
This is another point, though, is that I live in a republic, regardless of whether or not I want to, and I have to deal with liberals, progressives, Republicans, conservatives, et cetera, et cetera. And somehow I have to get all of you to not kill each other, right? And so as much as you can hate these tribal leaders and think that they're bad faith or obtuse or selectively autistic,
I don't disagree with you. But it would just go back to that thing, just don't have a neutral position. Just don't have a position. Don't take a position on it. I just invite people to the show. That's all you have to do. Just say that. Don't take the responsibility or the blame for them not being able to read a prompt that every other person understood.
Okay. I'll think about that. Sure. I think it's hard for me because I wear like 3 or 4 hats, and I also have like aspirations as well.
Sure.
So try being like conscious of what hat you're wearing and trying to calculate exactly how you should phrase something. And by the way, like whenever I'm talking at all, I'm telling you exactly what's in my brain. That's probably why I'm so long-winded.
Okay.
So yeah. So remembering which hat I'm wearing and then saying the exact right thing to get the result is not typically my approach. My approach is, this is in my brain, it's coming out.
Sure, that's fine. But then you have to accept then that if that's your MO, if that's how you're going to operate, well, then obviously I'm going to come out swinging really hard against that because I feel like you're undermining what I think should be an easily observable fact. And our incentives are not aligned there, right?
Sure. No, 100%. And there's a part of me that enjoys the combat as well. I think the reason, the main point that I was steaming a little bit yesterday, I think the main thing that I was fussy about is you just have, like Dan, right? He talks shit about how I'm long-winded. You mentioned that yesterday in the conversation. I can think back to a dozen creators who I think are retarded, half of whom now are like out pedophiles, like, Zerka.
We call them ephebophiles, actually, but...
Yeah, ephebophiles. So there's probably like 2 or 3 ephebophiles in your past who are fucking morons. But because they're entertaining morons, I could probably go back and find like 40 hours worth of content with them just talking about nothing. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I get pissed when people are like, "Shut the fuck up, make the point already." I'm like, "What, bitch? You listen to fucking John Zerka talk for 12 fucking hours. Shut the fuck up." So,
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, what did you want, Boner Box?
Oh, I just came in to chime in on the autistic thing, and then I felt rude just leaving without saying bye.
Way to go. Okay. I got to run downstairs and grab a thing from the package room. If you guys want to talk or if you want to rant to my audience, knock yourself out. Otherwise, I'll be back in a sec. Or you can leave or whatever you want. I'll be back.